Today I'm going to be showing you all how to best build Sung Jinwoo in solo leveling a Rise so you can take him from being really weak to insanely strong. And I'll be doing this by showing you all his best artifacts, weapons, skills, and much more. And overall the best artifact and accessory build for Sung Jinwoo is going to be utilizing the 4 set effects bonus of the Burning Curse set, alongside the 4 set effect bonus of the Expert set. However, of course, if you do also want to, you can also run Burning Curse on his 8 set effect as well, which is also really good. And let's start off with Burning Curse, and the reason why this set is really good, especially on its 4 set effect bonus, is the fact that you can increase your damage dealt by 20% and then additionally increase it by another 10% after 100 seconds has passed within whatever stage you're playing. So overall this can instantly give you a 30% damage increase. And then the reason why you're going to want to run the 4 set effect of Expert is basically because whenever you land a crit, you'll have a 50% chance to increase your attack stat by 1.6%, which can stack up to 100 times and will be able to be applied every 1 second. So essentially, whenever you stack this attack buff 100 times, it does mean you'll be able to increase your Sung Jinwoo's attack stat by 160%, which will give you a crazy amount of damage. And then when it comes to all of the best main and also substats for all of these pieces, let's start off with his main artifacts. And for his helmet, you're going to want to go for attack percent primarily, or you could go for additional attack as well. The body armor, additional defense or defense percent works perfectly fine. It doesn't really matter which one you go for. Attack percent on the gloves is also going to be fantastic, but just also like the helmet, additional attack will work fine, but overall I think attack percent is better. And then overall on the boots, critical hit damage is by far the best main stat, as it'll give you the biggest damage increase. For the accessory main stats, additional HP or HP percent on your necklace is going to be what you want, as it's the only 2 stats you can get. And then for your bracelets main stats, it really is just going to depend on what kind of weapons that you're currently using. As overall for me personally, I use a ton of dark weapons, as I use the demonic plumflower sword as well as also the shadow scythe a ton, which means overall I opt to go for a dark damage percent bracelet, as this is going to be the best way of increasing my damage, because those are the kind of weapons that I use the most. And then for the ring, again, attack percent or additional attack will be your best options. And then finally the earrings, of course, will give you additional mana points, which brings me on to his best substats. And easily by far your best substats will be attack percent, critical hit rate, and critical hit damage. Those 4 will be your best ones. And then also all of these other substats like defense pen and damage increase can also be beneficial, as they help increase your damage. And then also, speaking of stats, Sung Jinwoo has the ability to invest stat points into 5 different stats. And those stats are strength, vitality, agility, intelligence, and perception, which all give their own different increases. And overall, just to keep things very simple, you're going to want to max out your strength stat as much as possible and pretty much just invest all of your stat points into that. But then of course, to increase your damage even further, it's also very, very beneficial and very helpful if you do use and equip the better weapons on Sung Jinwoo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all of Sung Jinwoo's best weapons for every element in the game, and then also for all of those elements I'll give you a very nice free-to-play option, which will be pretty good as well. And starting off, we have the light element, and the best weapon for the light element is going to be the Truth Demon Knight Spear. And what this weapon really does excel at is just having its own ability to spam your skill a ton, which will overall give you a ton of damage as well, which means the best free-to-play option for the light element is going to be the Ridiru family's longbow, which is an amazing weapon, as you can get permanent damage increases through using your skill. For the fire element, Phoenix Soul is by far the best weapon in the game for the fire element, as most of its damage comes through its core attack, which is generated through using your skill as long as you have its first advancement dupe. But then it's also Orb of Avarice, which is an amazing free-to-play option, as it's kind of similar in a way, as it does a ton of damage just through its skill and through its other buffs like its Raging Black Flame. The dark element, I've got lots of weapons to talk about, as you have the demonic plumflower sword, which is probably the best weapon in the game by far, to be honest, as you can stack a bunch of crit damage, which will help buff all of your damage on your other weapons and skills, etc. But you can also buff your own crit rate, your attack stat, and just deal in general like really good damage, which is amazing. But then also Moonshadow, which has received so many great buffs recently. But then the only good free-to-play option for the dark element is going to be Shadow Scythe, as this gives you a crazy amount of skill damage increases through its A0 passive. And then for the penultimate element, we have the water element, and by far Thetis' Grimoire is going to be the best, but its main focus is around its A1 debuff that it does apply, which is called Deep Erosion. But if you don't have Thetis at A1 and you do have the Frostbite Falchion at A5, then this is another really good free-to-play option for you to use. And then finally, for the wind element, in fact the best weapon for the wind element is an SR weapon, which is the West Wind. And the reason why this weapon is so good is simply just because of all of the damage increases it offers to itself through its skill. As its main notable thing is going to be its A3, as basically whenever a secret bullet hits, you can apply the West Wind effect, which which will basically increase your skill damage by 30%. But then what is also absolutely amazing about this buff is that you can then stack it up to 5 times, which will give you a 150% damage increase to your skill. But then also with Sung Jinwoo, you have all of his basic skills. And overall, we now have 12 different skills for Sung Jinwoo within the game. And overall, if you're looking for skills that deal a ton of damage, then look no further than Sonic Stream, as 2 of its runes are absolutely broken, with the other 2 being not as good. But the first one is Magnifying Slashes, and this is the Dark Element rune of Sonic Stream. And what makes this so good is just the amount of damage it can deal, as it can increase its own skill damage a ton for 3 seconds and can stack up twice, which will be really good. But then also its Light Element rune, which is called Double Down, is also amazing because it also has a huge damage multiplier, as well as also the ability to increase its damage by a set amount whenever you attack an enemy who doesn't have a break gauge. And then another really good damage option is going to be Reap, which is the dark rune of Vertical Arts. This has received a massive buff recently, as it has a huge damage multiplier on a very low cooldown, and this damage can then also be increased even more when you do trigger its counterattack as well, which makes it a really good DPS option, and also helps you survive and stun your opponents, which is really good. And then there's also runes like Annihilation for Cutting Rush, as well as also Ascension for Dagger Toss, which are also pretty decent, as they can increase your damage dealt to targets by a really good amount whenever they are in the break state, which is pretty good. And then if you're looking for skills that deal a lot of break damage, then look no further than Armor Break, which is by far the best skill in the game for dealing break damage. As for me personally, its 2 best runes in the game are Vacuum Wave, which are its wind rune, as not only will this deal almighty break damage, which is the most amount of break damage you can deal in the game, the main part of this is the fact that when you land the skill's damage, you can then increase the amount of damage that your targets will take by a set percentage for a set amount of time, which then leaves Decimation, which is another really good option, as it has a huge amount of break damage again, but just also this time a ton of damage in general, as its damage multiplier is massive. It's so good. And then we also have Death Stance, with all 4 of its runes being absolutely amazing, as its Fire one, Wildfire, will deal heavy break damage and can also increase your damage to enemies when attacking their elemental weakness. You have Eruption, which again will deal heavy break damage and will increase your damage dealt to bosses and elite monsters. High Speed Rotation is amazing, as you can use up to 3 times, has a very quick animation, and also lets you charge your power gauge really quickly. But what also gives you a ton of break damage is Countering Break, which can deal weak and also heavy break damage depending on if you land the counter. And with there being so many ways of you being able to buff your Jinwoo, there's also another way, and that is through Blessing Stones. So here's a list of all of the best Blessing Stones that I think are the best ones for you to use for Sung Jinwoo, as we have Advanced Dagger Technique, Daily Quest Completion, Mana Rampage, Reawakening, Sharp Perception, Bloodlust, Pulverize, Boss Slayer, Double-Edged Sword, Weakness Detection, and also We Are One. So then finally, to end off today's video, we have all of the best ways for you to build your teams with Sung Jinwoo. And let's start off with all of his best shadows, as this is probably going to be one of the more important things for you to do. And overall, Sung Jinwoo's best shadow authority leader for pretty much most of the content in the game is always going to be Igris, as Igris's all team members' critical hit rate increase is really good, as it can pretty much benefit anybody's damage in the game apart from Choi. And obviously, of course, the more you crit, the more you can proc your expert damage stacks, as well as just get more damage in general. And then for me, I think the second best shadow for you to run just in general is always going to be Serbi, as Serbi's combustion debuff is just way too valuable for you not to use, as you can increase the amount of damage that your opponents will take by 5%, which is completely permanent, so this is absolutely amazing and will give you a ton of extra damage. And then for the final shadow, you can go with one of these 3, which I personally think will be the best, as you can either go for Iron, Blades, or even Tusk. As what makes Tusk actually pretty good is the fact that Tusk can actually buff all of your shadow's attack stat by 20% with its Concentrated Heat skill. And then for Blades, Blades really does excel at doing a lot of AoE damage thanks to his skills like Frost Gazer and stuff like that, which is really good. And then of course, Iron is obviously fantastic, as Iron can create a shield equal to 10% of the user's max HP and gives it to all of your shadows, which will give them more super armor and more survivability in general. And then when it comes to your Hunter setup with Sung Jinwoo, pretty much most of the time, you'll want to run a setup that consists of 1 DPS, 1 break damage dealer, and then 1 support or sustain character. Which means for the DPS role, you can use characters like these. Then for the break damage role, pretty much any character in the game that deals break damage is fine, but these are pretty much the better ones. And then finally, for your supports or sustainers, these characters are absolutely amazing. So there you have it. That is the complete updated build guide to Sung Jinwoo. There's been loads of changes since I did my last one. But overall, if you did enjoy this video or you found it just useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, as it does help me out so much, and click the link down below to support me as a creator. But most importantly, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!